Welcome to another episode of Hat Collecting, the multi-passionate experience. This month for July, which is Disability Pride Month, I've been doing a special mini-series with a variety of disabled friends and peers that I know and talking about their disabilities, their experiences, and what we can learn from them. I am your host, Lacey Arnholz. My pronouns are she and they. I am a white, early 40s, feminine presenting person with long brown hair, and I'm wearing black headphones and a pink shirt. And I'm joined today by my friend, who will introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Victoria Urquhart. I use she, her pronouns. I am a feminine presenting person with, I am Caucasian with reddish brown hair. I'm currently wearing a sunny yellow button-down shirt with white polka dots. And I'm coming to you from my partner's living room.
Yes, I'm coming from an undisclosed location.
The mystery.
Yes. I have a set of questions that I've been asking or using as the guide rails, I guess. And sometimes we have gone in past episodes, sometimes we've gone off and I've asked other questions, but this is where we start and we see where it goes. But the first question, why we're here in the first place, what disability or disabilities, plural, do you personally experience that you would like to talk about today?
Yeah, I mean, I am AuDHD, so that's ADHD autistic. Happy to talk about that today. Also happy to talk a little bit about long COVID as a chronic illness and how we navigate spaces with that.
Excellent. Yes, we are both AuDHD, and I have been kind of following your journey through Facebook primarily of the very unfortunate experiences that you've been having with the medical system and getting various diagnoses. And we have talked, I spoke to past guest Yolanda Bonnell about accessibility and disability justice in the theater space, which is something that I also know that you have some experience with. So we could talk about each of those things. But the next question, do your multiple disabilities impact, influence, or inspire the work that you do, whether to the extent that you do advocacy versus just being a human being living your life with these, disabilities? And if you do advocacy, what forms of it do you do?
Yeah. So I would say where I'm at in my journey, my disabilities definitely inspire a lot of my work right now. Um, and that's because I was late diagnosed, so I didn't really fully come into this identity until a few years ago. And as per the journey that a lot of ADHDers have, it starts with one and then the other, and you kind of start piecing all of the things together. Um, and when I initially came to the realization of my autism, um, I started taking up space really differently, um, largely because there was an answer for that awful question that rings out in our heads of well, why am I like this? Why do I have to be this way? Why am I so difficult? Why am I taking up so much space, and why am I a burden to everybody, and why, and blah 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 blah, 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 all of the negative talk. And the start with that was, oh, because you're autistic. And being autistic isn't, why are you this way? It's actually like, it's a good thing because it's not bad. It's just different. And there is a way to navigate spaces responsibly so that your single experience doesn't take up the entire room. And this is why we always check, what is the space for, and then navigate from there. Because I don't want to enter a space that's very clearly about something else, and make it all about my autism. I also want to be able to enter a space that is meant for, equal opportunities, and especially within my art, um, neurodivergent experiences, new experiences, and be able to find a space that is that fit for my autism in various different ways. And also, my spike profile for my autism is going to be different from another autistic person's
We should
spike
pause on
profile.
that really quick. Sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you. Glad you're bringing that up because that hasn't come up yet. So what you're talking about, how would I describe this? It's kind of like a radial graph of sorts, and it has different categories, and then each category has almost like a plane propeller coming out from it, I guess. I'm trying to describe this from the picture in my head. And it's basically each category, it's like how high, how much you quantify. And I'm doing a terrible
Yeah,
job here, I
it's
feel like.
I think about it in the skills chart that RPG characters have sometimes.
Yes.
Um, and how it is a circular chart, and then there's like a pie slice in each
Mm,
section of that circular chart, and then across all of the pie slices there is like a dot or a line that a dot in each of those pie charts to identify what your skill set is in that area. And then as you connect those dots, they make spikes, hence spike profile. At least I think that's
yeah, it's funny, you said spike profile, and I've never heard it called that, but I instantly knew what you were talking about. So, because like to me, they look like the way that I usually see them, they look more like propeller blades or fan blades sticking out.
yeah, yeah,
But because they're always different lengths, like if that was an actual like fan, it wouldn't work very well because they're usually not equally like long.
yeah.
But yeah, so just for anyone that isn't familiar, that's kind of, if you go and search for maybe spike profile on image search, you probably find it.
Or spiky profile. I've seen that they've
Maybe.
they've switched it to spiky profile now, and I'm like, is the Y really the difference there? Uh, but
But yeah, so everyone's spike profile is different, you were saying.
yeah, yeah. Which explains how there's a range of abilities with social skills, and with verbal and nonverbal, and with problem solving, and all of the things that they like to include in there. Um, yeah, uh, navigating and finding the moments of when we take and when we give space, and um, that's an ongoing journey for a lot of autistic people, and understanding that taking up space isn't bad, because we've been told for so long, like, how could we take up so much space? It's such a burden, as is the disability way.
Well,
Society
yeah.
was not built with us in mind, but it could be.
It reminds me of how I've seen uh, there's been like memes on the internet about how ADHD isn't named for what it actually is. It's named for the way that it inconveniences neurotypicals. It's like
Yeah,
we don't have an attention deficit. We can hyperfocus. It's just that we have trouble regulating that focus. So at least autism is not named that way.
yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, there are aspects of autism that have definitely been named that way, but we're unearthing that, and we're dismantling that, which I'm really glad for. Um, but yeah, that's been a really big inspiration point for me, particularly because what we're seeing now in the world outside of the disability perspective, and like we saw it in the pandemic, and not just on a base level with disabilities. It's the world is there's a lot of processes that are going on infrastructurally, as well as communally, where we're finding we need a lot more cognitive empathy. There needs to be a lot more consideration of the mental and emotional processes that we go through to complete tasks now. Um, it's like we exhausted ourselves or something and ignored a lot of things for way too long, but who knows what that's about. um, but yeah, and a lot of autistic people are kind of faced with those issues from the second that we're born. And like a friend of mine who has a very different autistic experience from me, actually, when we first met and when we first started hanging out, would actually give me instructions for how to operate various different things, including conversations, because they wanted to provide other people access to them. And they wanted other people to not have to struggle with the same points that they struggled with learning how to operate a simple piece of technology, the first 10 times. And that, like, and while some people, I imagine, would find that annoying on a social level, for myself, like, I automatically, like, I really connected with that from my experiences and went, this person wants things to be easier for me, you know? And so I really connected with that. And I see that this isn't every autistic person, but I see that in a lot of people. And in regards to my art and how it reflects on society, and how we see a lot of the issues that we're going on that we're going through on a micro to a macro level, I just see so many small steps that take like less than a second to do that can help with that. And so that's right now, that's where a lot of my art comes from, a lot of my storytelling, as well as, making space for invisibly disabled stories, perspectives, characters, because not a lot of people know that story yet, and not a lot of people even know the term cognitive empathy, and how that is to differ from, what we consider to be regular empathy. A lot of people don't know that there's multiple forms of empathy. So that's a big inspiration point for me. And that is, I think that's like the first 25% of the question that you asked.
Yeah. We can think we'll probably, because I think that the neurodiverse stuff is going to tie in with the other parts. So I want to make sure that we give sufficient time to kind of your more recent experiences, because unfortunately we are in this time where we're still in a pandemic, even though a lot of people like to think otherwise, and people are still unfortunately becoming permanently disabled by COVID, even in 2025. And like it has been talked about in at least one previous episode of this series, but and I had a scare recently where I thought that I might have gotten long COVID. I'm still not sure what that whole situation was, but yeah, I guess I don't want to just be like, oh, tell your story, because that's too broad. But like, I'm trying to figure out where to start and how to come into this. That that I don't want to make it like too. I want to help to make it easier for you, I guess, to tell the story.
Yeah, no worries.
Um, so when I guess when we'll kind of maybe we'll do it in like bite-size bits, and then we can go in a bit deeper. So approximately when did your long COVID journey start?
Hmm. Um, yeah, I mean, it started with vaccination for me because I had a vaccine reaction. I am pro-vaccine, just to put that out there. And uh, I was able to get my first vaccine and my second vaccine relatively quickly. Um, and that was because coming from disability and uh, knowing that uh, it would be really difficult to navigate the whole system administratively. A lot of autistic people get caught up in administrative systems, and we don't mean to. Um, and a lot of that happens because it is a lot of the time like what's being presented to us is there's a new infrastructural process, and we would love to be able to just fit right in and have it very direct and not cause any problems for anybody. But also, in order to do that, a lot of the time we have to ask questions ahead of time, to make sure that we understand, to make sure that we can go through it. And then a lot of people get mad at us for asking questions that a lot of people think, oh, well, that's simple, basic knowledge. Like people should know how to do this. And it's like, actually, nope. And there's a lot of minute, detailed explanations as per why. Um, and I digress. I was able to get my vaccine early on, and the first one went great. The second one, I had a reaction, and I was hospitalized for 4 days. It was a little scary at the time. We didn't know all of what was going on, and our healthcare system was already strained at that time. And so the amount of time and thought and care that could go into that was quite limited. And I was discharged rather quickly before we knew a lot of what was going on. And so my GP and I just got a GP right before this happened too. So it was a very, like, after years of not having a GP, I got one and we were comfortable with each other. It was and then all of a sudden this hit. And so my GP, the second I got out, sent me to get all of these tests done, and all of them came back negative. And so we kind of sat and we waited. But what we had found was there was like one or two tests that were still coming back positive, for like something's off. There's a certain amount of organ issues. We don't know what this is. And so we just kept an eye on it for months. And then I started to get some rashes and stuff that started to pop up, just like skin stuff. And they weren't really fully healing. And so I kind of kept tagging that in my mind with questions. And then, I mean, I've always had a little bit of, you stand up too quickly and you could get dizzy, but then those started to like get larger. And then I got COVID for the first time at the end of that year. And my experience of COVID, it was interesting because my ADHD medication, with a lot of stimulants, when you are on a stimulant, it raises your adrenaline so that it can raise the other chemicals in your brain to function. And by raising your adrenaline a bit, it also blocks out a certain amount of pain. So I was kind of going about my day, and felt like things were okay. I had a bit of a cough, and I got this from my partner. Of course, I got it from my partner, who also tested negative, but also at that point had more vaccines than I did, because he could, whereas I could not. We had decided, my GP had told me it's probably a good idea that you don't get any more. I'd actually had 3 by that point. But my partner came home sniffling and sneezing, took a few tests, negative, and then gave it to me. And I had some sniffling and sneezing, but then figured it was okay. And then the medication would wear off, the ADHD meds would wear off at night. And I'd sit there at 7 o'clock being like, why do I feel so awful? And I think by day 3, I took a COVID test, checking in on that, and it came back bright red positive. I was like, oh no. And then I got through that. The dizzy spells started to increase. And then in the fall of that year, no more, like, wasn't even 6 months later, I ended up in the hospital with a vomiting episode. Content warning for people, but I won't go into it beyond that. And my blood work came back from that, and it was kind of weird, but nobody thought anything of it. What I will note is that what we know of that now is that that was metabolic acidosis, and probably induced by being so sick spontaneously, and also had our healthcare system not been as stocked up at the time, or not stocked up, but as backed up at the time, as burnt out at the time, because this was 2022. I would have been admitted for investigations, and that was really the beginning of it, and that was where I should have been admitted. Unfortunately, our healthcare system is continuing to work in a triage basis in an extreme manner, so that this could not be properly investigated. There weren't even any notes sent to my GP. There wasn't anything with that. And it, like, nobody thought anything of the low bicarbonate. Nobody thought anything of the numbers, except to go, oh, that's weird. We'll mention that it's weird. No details. And after that, I really struggled to eat. I was getting more and more tests showing a lot more issues. Spring of 2023, I got COVID again, and things really started to crash. September of 2023, all of a sudden, my blood tests are coming back really, like, now we're starting to raise some serious questions. My bilirubin is elevated, and there's some swelling going on in the liver. We got to get an MRI. We got to get the tests continued through beginning of 2024. I was at the point where I was on a low FODMAP diet. I had lost 12 pounds, and I was like, there was more rashes. There was a lot of spots. I had lost my well, I hadn't lost, but I was losing my menstruation cycle. It was getting scary, um, and we didn't know what was going on. After months of looking at the low FODMAP diet and all of the tests and trying to put things together, I remember seeing alongside the low FODMAP diet the low histamine diet. And I looked at that and I was like, can't be that. Can't be that. And it kept coming up and coming up and coming up. And then I saw on a forum a group of supporters, a group of folks who were supporting each other because they needed low histamine diets to battle their long COVID. And I started to piece things together. I started to look up various different articles, and I was like, oh, this is it. And like, I felt it. Like, when you land on something and you know that it's right, or when something happens and or that chill that runs down your spine where you know something before it happens. For me, it's a click. Like, I just feel this, like something turns, like there's clockwork in my body, and it just, something shifts in the right place. There's a gear that turns in the right place, and there's a click. And that was the moment where it's like, I know what I have. I know what I'm dealing with. And then that night, I made myself a pasta dinner because I had been off of pasta for the longest time because that's not low FODMAP. And I had no pain. And I cried because I had been off of pasta. I had been off of tomatoes. I had been off of various different things that I thought I had to be off of for low FODMAP when actually it was low histamine. Still off of tomatoes. The goal is I'm going to be able to eat tomatoes again, but that was the beginning. And I took my partner by the hand. I grabbed a bunch of research, and I went to my GP, who was adamantly telling me that this wasn't it. And I said, no, it is. Did you read this article? Did you read this? Did you read this? All in front of my partner, so that and I said, I want this test. I want this done. We're going to put me back on a corticosteroid just so I can gain a little bit of weight back. And this is how we're going to move through this. And also, I want you to start giving me these tests to lead to a long COVID diagnosis. And at this point, too, all of the long COVID clinics had closed. This was the beginning of 2024. They'd all closed down in Ontario. And most people get a long COVID diagnosis after years. And technically, it had been over a year since we first really found out what, like, saw the suffering. A few years since I had been first infected. But what I learned from September 2023 was my body's telling me things that I need to listen to beyond my doctors, because my doctors are not helping me. My doctors consistently were telling me after the initial episode, you have anxiety. This is fibromyalgia, maybe. You need to stop pursuing this. You need to be more involved in social activities. And thankfully, I had a psych and a counselor at my back who could clarify and say to them, this is not anxiety. These concerns, this pain is real. And I mean, I have a psych at my back because I have been involved in studies in order to gain access to my mental health support, and not everybody has that. And my ADHD autism supports specifically. And I have access to a counselor because I'm a child of a divorced marriage where my parents, they divorced when I was 5, and they were like, it's their fault. They're gonna screw the kid up. We better put her in counseling. One of the better choices that they made, and I love them both. But having those two at my back, that was part of what turned the key. And also that is a significant amount of privilege that I want to acknowledge within that. And then by November of 2024, so not even that long ago, I got officially diagnosed with long COVID through an infectious disease specialist. And it was very funny because at this point I had raised money to go into private care for a little bit, and we had certain tests, and my funding had just run out for that. It was recommended by the liver specialist that I had been to after the high bilirubin, where I was told that I was using guerrilla war tactics to gain my testing, which was not true. That was a one-off specialist, and they were having a day. I think I might have been the 5th or 6th person who had come in with some similar issues. And this is also why you always bring a witness to your healthcare sessions, your medical sessions, medical appointments. But I had a tilt test. I had done additional tests for heart rate at the infectious disease specialist appointment. And I also was explaining symptoms of histamine intolerance, as well as, the heightened blood tests, what we had found thus far, how I was navigating that. And he was looking at all of these tests that I had, and I was I can't even remember what experience I was explaining, but he just interrupted me mid-sentence to say, and for context for this, you, especially when you're in the beginning stages, you don't say, I think I have long COVID to any doctor, because they will shut you down. They will gaslight you incredibly hard because they don't want to deal with it, because they're scared. This is the big thing. Doctors are scared. The second things step outside of what they know, it's a concern, it's a liability. Imaging doctors see about 70 radiologists see about 70 cases a day. And so there's no time to list incidentals or differentials, which often leads to, things being missed. As well as, when a specialist, especially, is asked about something that starts to branch outside of their specialty, or that they have to work collaboratively on, which tends to be the case with long COVID, it gets really scary really fast. And there's a potential liability there if they give information that is outside of their scope. So they have to be specifically studying COVID and long COVID in the first place in order to be able to give any information on that. And so there were no doctors at this point who would even give me a second, like they would be sending me on my way if I had said, hey, I think I have long COVID and this is what this is causing. So instead I had to say, well, I have this like post-viral something, things haven't been the same since, and I'm dealing with this issue and this issue. Can we look into this? Meanwhile, I have this whole separate book of I need to get this test and then this test and then this test, and this will help me diagnose long COVID. And even if they don't give me the long COVID diagnosis, I can at least treat it in this way. And I can figure this out through this. I was basically being my own doctor at that point. So we're at this meeting with the infectious disease specialist, and I'm listing all of these things thinking, I'm not going to get the long COVID diagnosis today. What I'm going to get is further testing, and we're going to get some blood work done, and then that will be able to move me to a neurologist, and then that will be able to move me to a cardiologist, and on and on and on. And he's looking through and he's listening to me talk about this, and in the middle of my explanation, he just interrupts me and goes, "Oh my God, you have long COVID." And I take a beat and I look to my partner who's sitting beside me. And then I turn back to him. And because this was not the most emotionally regulated that I had been in a while, I yelled at him in the office and I said, "Thank you." And then I started crying. It's like, "You have no idea how long I've been going through this." And he starts laughing. And he's like, "Yeah, you are the poster child for long COVID." And I just needed it on my chart because I needed several other doctors to stop telling me it was in my head. There were other steps to go after that. And then from there, we were able to go to like, a kidney specialist, a urologist, all of the ologists. And then, and then things got a little more confusing, but that was like the big moment for me with long COVID that really made things a lot easier. Aside from the, figuring out that I had a histamine intolerance. And then for the rest of the day, I'd go over to my partner and be like, hey, guess what? I have long COVID. Like it was some sort of a fashion statement, because especially when you're chronically ill, the diagnosis and the naming of it is so important. You can't treat it. And so many doctors said, don't worry about what it's called. Don't worry about, like, call it Frank if you want, but don't go seeking the name. Don't go seeking diagnoses. That's just really anxiety talking. And I was like, I'm gonna find what this is so that I can treat myself appropriately. Last year was my year of naming. This year is my year of release. Not necessarily that I'm going to go and cure my long COVID, but since naming it, since finding that diagnosis, things have become a lot easier. And since doing that, navigating long COVID when working on sets, when working in theater, when doing interviews, when doing any of these things, it becomes so much easier. And that was such a huge win. Since then, there have been issues where, like, one imaging and one imaging, diagnostic imaging, and one doctor told me that I have stage 4 kidney failure, and I had to live under that for a few months. I don't have stage 4 kidney failure, which is why second opinions right now, especially within diagnostic imaging, are so important. And why we advocate for ourselves so much. So to answer your other question, as I go on this whole journey, my advocacy started with a lot of my realization of my own needs. Whereas in previous years, I think I felt like I wasn't able to advocate, and um, I felt like I wouldn't even know where to start in any kind of allyship. And then once I saw how different things connected to me, and how lifting up others was beneficial to me and also like beneficial for the community, um, that's where my advocacy journey began. Um, and cut to where we are now, and I'm advocating for myself in healthcare. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't already been advocating as an artist, both for myself and for other people, which is also why I tend to talk about my healthcare story. Because there's a lot of people without access to supports for long COVID. That was a really long rant. Thank you for attending my TED Talk.
Well, let me give you a chance to rehydrate there, and I'll share a little bit briefly on my side of things here. Yeah, one of the things that I thought of while you were telling the story, and thank you for sharing all of that. I've seen
Thank you
this
for
kind of
letting me go
debate.
on.
No, I mean you need to give context, and like I have other friends who have gone through similar things in different ways, and um, like it's very it's cathartic and necessary to be able to like get it out and be heard.
Yeah.
Kind of like some other non-disability related things in my life, but um, I'm one of the things that made me think of was the kind of ongoing debate that I've seen on the internet for years, where there's the labels versus the no labels camps, and some people are like I don't want to like I'm not autistic, I'm just me or something like that, and like
Yeah.
okay, well maybe you don't want a label, but if this other person feels like it really empowers them and explains things and makes them not feel like they're just broken, then I think they should be allowed to claim a label for themselves and take power and pride in that. um, so yeah, like that's a thing, and like that kind of also comes back to the cognitive empathy, which is a great term. I love that. I wrote that down. I'm gonna look into that more, because I know another thing that we're really dealing with in the world right now is I call it like empathy fatigue, basically. Like
Mhm.
when everything is constantly bad and you're always like, oh, I need to feel sorry for these people, I need to feel bad for these people, I need to feel, and like you can't, we
Yeah.
don't have that much. And so I think a lot of people end up disconnecting and tuning out because they're like, I want to care, I just don't have the capacity anymore. And they're not trying to be selfish jerks, they're just like, I basically can't function if I keep pouring out of a cup that is already empty, as they say, in
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah.
And what's the other thing I was going to say? Oh yeah, like the for me, so um, I have been out of the corporate 9 to 5 world for 9 months now, 8 months. Um, still definitely working on not having to go back to it, but I made a lot of progress there. But I realized how for so many years I put a lot of sorry.
There was a motorbike just drove
Okay,
by.
because
Sorry.
there is some sound coming from nearby, and then there was on the other side, and I was like, oh, but anyway, okay, sorry. Um, so, ye- yes, okay. The ADHD almost got me there.
Almost. It was right there.
Yeah, like for all of my like kind of time in the corporate world, I was always told like don't disclose because like HR is not there to help you. They're there to protect the company. So if you tell them that you're autistic and that you need these accommodations or whatever, then like they're probably like most likely they're just gonna like try to start making your work life unpleasant and miserable so that you will eventually leave and they can hire somebody who's not autistic to do your job. Um, and so I took that kind of to heart for a long time. And it's kind of been, I want to say funny is not the word, but now that I've broken off on my own and like I started my own company because I was like, I'm fed up with just there not being events and spaces that are sensory friendly that I can, like, I want to be able to go and like connect with people. Like, we're in a loneliness epidemic here, and all these events, there's like loud music playing, and like there's like just the acoustics of the venue suck, and like they're not accessible for a million reasons. And like I've talked to people and they're like, yeah, it'd be nice to have more events where I don't have to like yell to talk over, right, to hear people. And like, there's just I've started to notice how even beyond my own struggles, all the other ways that things are not accessible, and financially is another one. Um, and so like I started to kind of like my first, it's been almost a similar process of like, first was like, hey, I think somebody needs to do something about this. Like, oh, okay, I guess I'll start trying to run some events independently, and I'll make them more accessible in the ways that I wish other events were. And then that sort of started to go towards like, oh, I want to do neurodivergence, neurodiversity advocacy more broadly, because that is the primary thing that like influences how I experience the world and live my life more than anything else. And then that kind of went into, now it's getting to the point of like, okay, now what I can get into disability advocacy more broadly. And then I had a meeting last week where they're like, oh, well, why don't you like consult with like venues and event runners to like make their events more accessible? And I was like, I mean, I guess that's basically just an extension of what I was kind of already doing anyway. So it's kind of been like just these going up the stairs, and I'm just now reflecting back on how like, oh, so when I finally started to embrace and try to like advocate for my own access needs, and also the people, like, it's not going to make things worse for anybody else. It's only going to help everybody. So, and I'm like, oh, great. I get to do this thing that is like, I finally get to be honest and open and transparent and like proud of who I am and what I am. And it also gets to, this is my mini TED talk. It
It's
also
great.
help other people. And it's like, and like, when I think about it, like, oh, if I, and the fact that like I've been on this podcast, the video podcast, but like I've talked about these glasses, and I've talked about wearing like earmuffs, and I've talked about special like, and I'm just even the fact that I'm like, I have hearing difficulties, and I'm getting more open about that, and starting to like be open about that in networking situations, which is awkward because people don't really know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
And but just like, yeah, you know what, I'm tired of spending all the energy of like, it's, maybe this isn't the best analogy, but it's the first one that came to my mind. It's reminding me of the idea of like, don't teach girls how to not get, SA'd, teach
Yeah.
not to SA. So don't waste all your energy masking so that other people are not uncomfortable. Make them learn how to make you more comfortable. So
It's
anyways.
like the study with the double empathy problem,
Mm-hmm.
which I encourage everybody to look up. With the way it was, I love the way it's referenced with NeuroWild, where it's like beavers talking to squirrels. And I can't remember whether it's the beavers or the squirrels that are supposed to be metaphoric for autism. But one is very aware of that there are multiple means of communication, and they try to adopt the language because they've been told this is the language you have to use, and they try to navigate through that and translate effectively to conform to being a squirrel. And it doesn't like the squirrels hate the beavers for trying to be squirrels. And also, if a beaver just went out and said, "Hey, I'm a beaver," the squirrels would be like, "Okay, ew, no, why? You need to talk like a squirrel." And then when they try, but then like the squirrels, they're not trying to change their language. They're not trying to, and this isn't necessarily everybody. And there's 50,000 ways in which to do that people don't realize the nuances that are required to help a beaver talk like a squirrel. And then meanwhile, beavers can like connect with squirrels and have empathy for squirrels. And beavers can also connect with beavers and have empathy for beavers. But squirrels cannot connect with beavers and have empathy for beavers. And why is that? And a lot of that is based on what we're taught and thin slice judgments, and being taught that people who try to connect in this way without automatically knowing what the social cues are, and without automatically knowing the culture that is here, um, all of a sudden deems this person inappropriate, a creep, must be someone who has experience with SA, which is a very like, come on, and must be mentally ill, blah, 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 like all of the things that thin slice judgments like to do. And also, how do you tell people to ignore that gut instinct, and how to, it's not even ignore the gut instinct, it's gain better specificity with your gut instinct to understand when it's someone who has a different experience of a social culture here, than another person who is really, really acting predatory. I have I when I was much younger, that was an ongoing thing that I couldn't understand because I was very, very direct. When kids were shy and I was in kindergarten, I would go, "Can you talk?" Um, so I was a very outgoing kid, and then I was taught that that wasn't appropriate or allowed. And then I started to become shy because I started to get worried that I would get hurt or punished for doing what I wanted to do, and speaking in the way that I wanted to speak. Um, and yeah, but it's interesting because also, like, with the double empathy problem, like, autistics get together and we have our own, like, we fall into our own code just by seeing each other, just by talking with each other for like 5 seconds. Um, Whereas, we go and speak with someone who's holistic, and and there's some navigation. Um, yeah, another TED talk in the can. So
I feel like you and we could easily fill hours. I'm kind of curious, like, so you're obviously still dealing with the long COVID situation. Or maybe I shouldn't say obviously, you are. I know that I'm kind of feeling that.
okay.
But I guess I'm curious because what I've experienced, less so from my own vantage point, but I've seen other friends go through it, that when you get chronically ill to a certain degree or worse, that society kind of tends to like leave you behind or push you to the side. And I know, being in theater and being an actor and being an artist, you kind of have like a, I don't know, this sounds like I'm being presumptive and putting words in your mouth. I'm not trying to, but being in the theater world, you have more, I guess, I would suspect you have more regular, ongoing interactions with people um, than a person with like a normal kind of 9 to 5, maybe. And so, and I know the theater space has a higher preponderance of like non-normative people, I'll just say. So I'm not doing a good job of asking a question here. I guess however you can maybe like simplify it, how is this, are you getting, you're in the process, are you in the process of getting back to kind of like more of the a regular life like you used to have or that you would want to have? Is that going to be, to what extent is that going to be possible, do you think? And what things maybe you think are not going to change? Sorry, that's a
No, that's a good, because I see that question applying on a level of chronic illness, and then I see that question applying on a level of AuDHD. Um, in terms of AuDHD, there's no going back, and I don't want there to be any going back, because this gives me agency over, like, over what rooms I choose to navigate and why and how. With chronic illness, that is also true to a degree, and also my chronic illness is a dynamic disability. So some days it is very prominent, and other days it's barely there. It will consistently fluctuate, which then leads a lot of people to ask, well, then how can you be disabled? And it's like, dynamically. I'm a dynamic person. What can I say? My biology has already confounded several scientists. And also, dynamic disabilities have been around for a long time. And I encourage everybody to look it up. But yes, for my chronic illness, I'm consistently hopeful, especially currently, because my most recent healthcare visit, we were given a lot of answers, and there were a lot of options for treatment and care that actually made it seem really possible that this may not be something that I'm dealing with for the rest of my life. And that's not something that everybody hears. And I need to say that with a caveat, because also, one, everyone will become disabled eventually. That is a truth that is actually in the Ontario Human Rights Code. That it acknowledges that we will all become disabled eventually. At least the last time I checked. I can just, someone's gonna hear this and then look it up and be like, "She's wrong." Please.
Oh,
please
there's a special on Netflix right now about a guy who's trying to break that, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah. But and so while there are while there's questions of, am I going to have long COVID forever? That may not necessarily be the case. But now also, as I am aging, and as I am, living with, I'm semi-reluctant to say this online, and also itself. So since I'm living with the TISM, comorbidities of that do also include things like Ehlers-Danlos. And that is something that I have scored highly on. So while I may not live with long COVID forever, it could create complications for a potential Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis, which is something that's, in consideration with everything right now as well. Will that mean that I am living life the same way as I'm living with long COVID in the future? Not necessarily. There's way too many variables up in the air with that. And there are, what I'm finding now with living with this is that there are a lot more ways that I can be taking care of myself that are not even known to, like, oftentimes the public healthcare system. Um, Regardless of whether someone believes in a naturopath or not, I highly encourage people to go and talk with a naturopath and set up a session or two, just to gain a sense of their perspective, and look up the stuff that they're talking about. Because and really, like, just test out some things for themselves. There's another motorcycle driving by, I think. Could be very slow. No? Just
Ignore the peanut gallery.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Um, but and I think this is power of perspective. This is power of being autistic and everything all at once again. Is we need to, especially when taking care of ourselves, and especially when engaging healthcare and considering options that we don't even know we have. Um, Look at, like, talk to all of the people involved in all of the different approaches. And you may believe that it's woo woo, not real, and all of the things. That's fine. You should still hear it, because you never know when that's going to save you. And no, I'm not saying, like, suddenly, changing your religion and getting involved in ritual, like, however you choose to worship and recharge and live spiritually. That, like, if spirituality intersects with healthcare for you, great. And if it doesn't, great. Like, but it's so important to engage and learn what is out there, because that will provide you so much benefit in the most unlikely of circumstances. For myself, currently, I did engage a naturopath that at the time I was like, there's no, like, this is what? And then I learned about lymphatic drainage and how that can actually affect brain fog, and how that can help you neurologically, as well as they actually didn't suggest this, but it's starting to become more prominent for me, especially in the hot weather. Starting my day putting salt under my tongue, to balance out my electrolytes and also kind of jumpstart my system in the morning. The latter is not as scientifically proven, and they're still doing studies on that. But in terms of maintaining my electrolytes, because my electrolytes have been all over the place, that's really important for me, because I lose a lot of electrolytes through the day, and I can't just drink water. And I'm not going to go and drink some lemon water concoction for me, because also the taste of water is, I can get very sensory avoidant with that very quickly. There's so many ways that we can take care of ourselves that we won't know until we engage in research, we engage in talking to various different people with various different perspectives. That is research too. The best one that I actually found so far was this, in terms of engaging your parasympathetic nervous system, because I think I've engaged too much of my sympathetic, or the reverse, sorry. I've engaged too much of my parasympathetic nervous system because I'm very low blood pressure, and I should be engaging more of my sympathetic nervous system without just giving myself a bunch of trauma. So something, and there are a lot of studies that are being explored on this right now. Whether it's 100% true or not, we don't know. And also, the exercise that I do in the morning to support this, it doesn't hurt me. It's a simple breathing exercise that in theory could help me get rid of lactic acid at the beginning of the day, because that's the studies that they're finding now with long COVID in terms of metabolism and whatnot. And if it's not true, great. I just did a breathing exercise that's probably going to help me as an actor later on. If it is true, I'm expelling lactic acid. You know, who knows? Like, I will conclude this last TED Talk with not last, but you know what I mean. This latest one. There we go. Words. With I read a really wonderful book called Unthinkable, and I say it's wonderful because it comes with so many different perspectives. This journalist has specifically sought so many different perspectives, and I don't agree with all of them. And I love that I don't agree with all of them. And one of the things that they talk about in a chapter is that, aside from the fact that we've moved away from science in different ways as a truth-telling system, and we need to move back to that, but we need to move back to that with the right framework. And it's not that the science is incorrect, it's that our interpretation of it can frequently be incorrect. And we need to make space for there to be mistakes for how we interpret that science. And if we can hold space for that, that means that we can respond faster in an emergency scenario like with COVID and like with the pandemic. There were communities that benefited so much from having someone, a scientist or a researcher in the community, just consistently updating them on what practices were considered safe and what were not, because there was space held for the fact that, okay, this is what the latest science says. And then knowing that it may not necessarily be true later, we're still learning. We're still figuring out all of it. Like, we don't know how to cure COVID yet. I mean, we know how to cure it in like the immediate sort of, kind of. We don't know what long COVID does, and we don't know how to cure long COVID. The studies that are going on right now, we just like, folks were talking about biomarkers before, and now they're speaking with much more certainty about the biomarkers outlining long COVID, which then leads to, you know, a lot more information about how you might be able to cure different expressions of it, depending on various different factors. That's me speaking very hopefully, and I also acknowledge that I am such an optimist, and I need to be. I'm living with this.
The world needs more optimists. This
Sorry,
is yep.
Can I mention one last thing?
Yeah.
Just on the autism route, and feel free to we can edit it out however you want it, if you want to use it. Just last thing that I forgot about. So I just want to acknowledge that, like, for me, being out and autistic is there's a certain amount of privilege that I have in that. Because of, like, being white, being straight appearing, being cis, and having the access that I have had. I literally, like, fell into my ADHD diagnosis and my autism diagnosis through doing a study, which then got me diagnosed and then allowed for me to get access to medication in ways that a lot of people don't. And also, there are a lot of studies out there now that are leaning towards disclosure is the best way to gain empathy and accommodations and support, and to be hired. But that's not necessarily the case. Still, there's still a lot of mixed studies on that. And I have had the privilege to be able to go and identify and be like, I'm autistic. And then they go, well, what does that mean? And I say, well, for me, that means blah, blah, blah. And also having access to the education that I have, it means that I hand them a piece of paper and go, this is what this means. For me, these are the access supports that I need. And if you're cool with that, then we can work together in a space. And also, there are a lot of hiring situations and a lot of applications that I have done to various theaters that still don't understand what that means, and to various just artistic projects in general that don't understand what that means. And so there has still been, like, that's not to say this is all bright and shiny and happy all the time. There's work to be done, and there's a lot of the time there's a lot of folks that don't understand what that is, don't understand when they are causing a microaggression, don't know what allism is. I encourage everybody to look up what allism is, because I have been in spaces where it's a lot of folks believe themselves to be very supportive of invisible disabilities and specifically autism, because it's a group of it's predominantly ADHD focused, and most of the folks in the room are ADHD, and that's all well and good, but ADHD isn't autism, and allism or allist ableism is specific to anti-autistic ableism. And that is something that still very much exists to this day. And so where I'm at in my journey now is having a lot of conversations with people and helping to educate people on how we can circumvent that, and what that looks like. And I draw a lot of that from the teachings that have been before. And I encourage everybody to check out Sins Invalid, amongst many other groups, and also want to acknowledge that a lot of the teachings on disability justice wouldn't be here without racial justice, without various different justice practices that have given us the language to be able to advocate for ourselves, which is why it's important to not just be in support of disability identities. We need to look at the whole consideration of what is diversity, equity, and inclusion. I just needed to mention that, because if I wasn't acknowledging where a lot of my teachings, where a lot of my experiences come from, I would feel like I'd be doing a disservice. Okay, last small TED Talk. Thank you. Now we can wrap.
If I can get you to do one more TED Talk, I
Please.
do want to just give you a chance to speak to this, because I mentioned it before. So I recently attended a play reading that you led and facilitated, and I was very impressed and admiring of the lengths at which you went to try and be inclusive and supportive. And I think we talked briefly about that kind of thing in the broader theater space, but I'm curious to ask you now, from what you have seen, and I know you could probably mostly only speak to maybe just here in Toronto, or even just maybe Canada, but what are you seeing in terms of those sorts of accommodations and considerations being made more often going forward, and more broadly for more people?
That's a great question. So I should posit that that story and that exploration of that story, um, there's a lot that is being developed with that, because um, in terms of access that is provided um, for neurodivergence, and I mean, there's only so much that a theater, like a company, can budget for access. And that's also why there's amazing advocates and artists out there who are advocating for access centered infrastructure. Um, and I tell the stories that I do in that particular story because in the full scale of that story, um, we're not just going to have, um, a relaxed performance of the show. Um, in that version, in that story, it is advocating for and providing frameworks for multiple versions of relaxed performances. Because for myself, um, I what a lot of people don't know, like when we look at the form of autism, let alone AuDHD, that's in mainstream media and discussion. Um, a lot of the time, we see a cis white dude who is sensory avoidant, um, and maybe verbal, maybe nonverbal, struggles with social cues, so we should give him space. Um, Aside from the problematic intersecting issues of that with cis white dudes getting a lot of space in general, let's introduce some more people who are not cis white dudes, please, with this particular identity. Um, um, what did I just make that commentary? Oh. Aside from that, people don't realize that there's multiple forms of autism. We talk about autism is a spectrum, and like a lot of people don't know the radial dial kind of thing, and a lot of people don't know how all of that works. But the reason why my autism was missed for so long, aside from the fact that I'm pretty sure it's in my family for a very long time, and I'm not going to go diagnosing people because that's also ableist. Um, an internalized ableism. Um, I am sensory indulgent. There are a lot of people who have autism, are autistic, I should say, and are sensory avoidant, and can't. There are several sensory experiences that just cannot be tolerated, and that's valid. Um, and and there is the other. People don't realize that there is the other side of that scale, and like, especially as an AuDHD person, I need a certain amount of stimulation in order to engage a lot of the time. Um, I was the kid who was like going up to the huge booming speakers and like pressing my ear against it because I loved the sensation that it had on my eardrum. It was way too loud, and I gained a bit of hearing loss from that. And also, like, I was sensory seeking all the time. That doesn't mean that I am sensory seeking all the time. And there are times where the sensory is way too much, and it will fluctuate based on, burnout and all of the things. And there is such a thing as sensory euphoria. And a lot of the time we talk about sensory dysphoria, but what about sensory euphoria? Um, And there are ways to engage that so that there can be a night of a relaxed performance where, sure, the lights are up in the audience, and we're not seeing a lot of dramatic light flashes, because also some lighting, some work with lights can make people nauseous, myself included. As well as there's a version where there may be extra lighting, or there's a version like that's why, like, there's several scenes within a kitchen within my play. I guess I should plug my play at some point. I will.
If you want to.
That it's the thing that I just finished working on, and I will continue to work on because it's in its draft and workshop stages. But that is meant to engage an actual kitchen, so that, the smells are there to engage. There's a version, where there is a lot of bass so that people can feel that. Because these are ways that we hold our audiences too. And for myself, I've had multiple experiences where I go to see a piece of theater. Actually, a friend of mine had asked me about access for, because he's a deaf artist, and we went to, I don't even know if it was actually called a relaxed performance. It was one of the performances that included captioning for that translation for hearing audiences, which I am all about that. You don't need to translate for us. So if there's a specific night that we go to for that translation, that's okay. And also, like, you don't have to do, like, I love that. Because, like, yeah, we need to have that feeling to understand that need for access on all sides. And I mean, there's 50,000 other volumes that I could speak to that. And also, when he had that night for us to go and see it, there was also a visual access component for anybody who was blind, or was working with visual impairments, I believe is the right term, and also or low vision. I'm gonna call myself in there. I don't remember the term offhand, and also feel free to correct me. So there was someone who was giving descriptive audio a couple rows up. And as an ADHD autistic person, I'm hearing that, and I'm engaging the play, and I'm getting distracted by hearing that. And also, what is this space for? Who is this space for? What is the story being told? And in that moment, like, my friend had asked me, and how was that experience working with hearing the audio description while all of this was going on? And I said, well, yeah, it was a little distracting for me, and also that's okay. This night is focused on this, and, like, for me, this space is not about me right now. Like, this space is about, that translation, and providing access, with as much access as possible, with what can be supported within this budget, within this time. When there is a day that there can be multiple relaxed performances, as there should be, and as there should be stories that engage that more, so that every night at the theater isn't just different for the story, but for the type of experience that you are engaging, especially if you are working with invisible disabilities, because there is no normal and there is no typical, then maybe you may want to split those days up, so that, this night and this space is about this particular collection of access points. But for right now, with where we are and with the way that the infrastructure, not with the money we have, but with the way that the infrastructure is currently built, this is okay. Yeah, because the infrastructure needs to be built to support multiple access points in multiple forms. And the access that is currently available to us, it's not that it's not available, it's that it's not thought of. We don't, like, a lot of folks don't know or realize that it needs to be available. And that's why the infrastructure is not there. So that's a lot of what I'm building with my piece. My piece is called I Can Fly. It is about a late diagnosed autistic woman who uses that recent diagnosis to get closer to her family and friends in the most paradoxical way by setting boundaries with them. It talks a lot about mental and emotional labor and what is involved with accommodations, and how accommodations are not just necessary within the workplace, but in our homes and in our families and our communities, and how we've technically already built that in certain ways, and how we can really not just have that as an inherent talent that you can't teach talent. Yes, you can. Talent is just a collection of skills that you gained unconsciously because you needed them to survive up till now, or you engaged them for some amount of survival up until now. And once those skills become conscious, you can grow them. And so the discussion of accommodations and the subtle ways in which we accommodate each other can go from being unconscious and those things that are quirks within the family to actual fully fledged accommodation needs that are open and understood and welcomed and embraced and sometimes thought of before we even get into the space, because when it comes to our family, like, there's love there and we love each other, and sometimes we want to assume each other's needs before, actually getting into the space. How was that for a TED Talk? Tory talk?
Yeah, it's funny. I was gonna say, like, you should totally have your own podcast. It'd just be called Tori's TED Talks.
I think I might get sued for that, but
yeah, you'd have to spell it differently so that it's like Blu-ray or whatever. But I'm gonna say something kind of self-serving here, and to the audience. I'm saying that to the audience. You're my friend, and you're one of the things I just love so much about you. I've only known you for a few months, but I genuinely love how thoughtful you are. And I know a lot of my other autistic friends are like this, and if you find the right topics, like, I literally could just sit and listen to you for hours, which is why we need to hang out more.
Agreed.
But yeah, like, and there's a lot of stuff that I want to say in response, but I try to keep these episodes focused more on the guest, especially when we go a bit longer. I think with the length, I wanted to give you space and time to speak here, but I think what I'm going to actually do with this one, because we kind of did like 3 individual chunks. So as much as I don't normally edit this show, I think that it's going to make sense for this one to maybe like turn it into 3, like part 1, 2, 3, and do that. I could also put it out as the whole thing as well, but I just think that might make it a little easier for people to engage with.
I could talk for hours, and I could talk for hours about nothing. So, like, feel free to edit and feel free to, that's totally okay.
I like, it's one of those things, like, there's some people that I know where I'm like, I literally just want to do like a weekly show with you and just like talk to you about stuff, because like, and I'm like this too. Like, I'm the one doing the interviewing, and I don't feel comfortable just doing like a monologue podcast by myself. I'm a lot better when I have someone to like kind of bounce off of. Except, if I'm going up on stage and just delivering information, it's a little bit different. But I like, yeah, it's one of those special things. Like, not all autistic people kind of do this, but the one quick thing that I will say is, like, you were talking about all the like doing all your own research with the medical stuff, and I have a couple of other friends who've had to go down that road as well. And I remember when I read Tim Ferriss's book, I think it was 4 Hour Body. It's from years back, and he wrote about these different, like, he paid out of his own pocket to get a bunch of different testing done so that he could understand himself better, like physiologically. And he talked about, like, slow twitch and fast twitch muscle fibers and stuff. And like, even though I'm an artist and I'm very creative and I like to like make things, I have always had an interest in like science and how stuff works. And I just didn't go down that path. My sister did. She's got a master's in microbiology. And
Whoa.
yeah. And I was the one that didn't even get a master's in, art, because you don't really, yeah. But
Yeah.
I've always been interested in that stuff. And so I like, when you're talking about that stuff, I'm like, if it was easier, like I could just go to my doctor and be like, I'd like to get this test done. And then I'd like to sit down with someone and have them explain this to me so that I can understand it, because I want to understand this stuff. I want to be able to, like, the problem is, like, I'm a hypochondriac and I do have a tendency to, like, skies falling, no. I have friends, thankfully, who can help rein me in with that. But it's like, I do want to understand myself better, like mentally, emotionally, identity-wise, physically, like everything. And I'm endlessly curious, and I love learning, and I love sharing what I learn. So when I get to talk to somebody like you're not necessarily like an expert, but you're thoughtful and you're curious and you've done research and you're presenting your experience and you're presenting what you've learned. And I just, I'm so happy that I know people like this, and this is part of what I love about this show, is that I get to have these conversations and share this information, and hopefully it helps somebody, even if just me. So, with all that said, so you've got your show, I Can Fly. I'm not sure if you can talk about like when that might be ready for public consumption, or if there's anything else that you want to promote right now. But
Yeah, I mean, it's in development right now. Theaters, get at me. No, it's in development, and I've been having talks here and there with folks about it. Wow. Blah, blah, blah. And I see now all the ADHD.
Do you live next to a raceway?
Apparently. Yeah. I'm also like, I'm writing a bunch of things all the time. I'm performing a bunch of things all the time. And theaters, get at me. TV shows, get at me. Just, plug. And I'm trying to think of all of the things that are next, and I can't think of anything, of course. But folks can reach out at on my Instagram, G_NITENET. That's G_nightnet.
That link will be in the description. So
cool. And yeah, my autism has presented in a way that I just never, I've the social trauma hit me in the good way, where or at least I have healed from the social trauma to, that's a much better way of putting it, to assume that a lot of the time my view of the world is not the view of the world. I don't assume that my direct like the way that I take in the world and the way that I move through the world isn't, and I'm consistently reminded that it isn't the way that everybody moves through the world. And in some cases that means contextualizing as like, hey, I know I'm a weirdo, but and other times it's, oh, this person just must not know. Okay, that's okay. Like they could have come from 50 different places or experiences so that they just don't know this thing. I'm not going to assume that they're dumb. Um, and yeah, largely because when I was growing up, a lot of people assumed that I was dumb. And that in and of itself is a very ableist phrase that I try to take out. Yeah. So thank you for seeing that in me, and also just thank you for the time, the space. This is really wonderful, and I'm glad that I could be a part of it. And I hope there's like all more for you.
No, seriously, I could do like a weekly show with you, and I don't think we'd ever run out of things to talk about. It's like,
Agreed.
hey, so what's going on in your life this week? That's, just an endless.
Love it. Love it.
Because I'm also not more so. I'm spending less so spending my time learning about medical stuff for my sake of my health as I'm learning about whole new industries and things like aspects of like being self-employed that I haven't really come up against before, and like I'm learning a lot of stuff on the fly, which is cool, but also can be tiring and overwhelming sometimes. So this is kind of where it gets to be a mixture of fun and educational.
Well, don't take all of what I say as rude. I consistently say like everybody look up stuff. Don't take everything I say as this is
Well,
the
that's
way.
why I said you're sharing your experiences and things that you have learned, and that's not saying that those are facts. That's just, you're presenting information. And I think you're very clear about being, like second opinions and whatever, spirituality works for you. Like you weren't like proselytizing anything. So, at least I don't think so. But with that said, yeah, so with that, that's wonderful. I think, as I've been thinking about it, I think it does make a lot of sense to put this into 3 parts. And I will just very quickly, I know I alluded to it, that I created my own company that is not really doing much right now because it's summertime, and summertime's just not really a good time for independent events. But Arty Mix Events is the current name of my thing. The tagline was playful, creative connection for grown-ups, but it's kind of evolving now to be kind of more like playful, creative, accessible, inclusive connection for grown-ups. So that's a mouthful. And
Nice.
yeah, I also am kind of getting into kind of a bit of coaching and like consulting, but that's still kind of taking shape. So right now, that's kind of the main thing. But my website is lacyartemis.com. I am at lacyartemis on all the social media platforms that I'm on, except for Twitter/X, because I'm not. I mean, I still have an account there, but it's retired. I'm not going back for some what I think are obvious reasons. But yeah, that all said, thank you again for tuning in, for listening. I hope that you learned something, and I'm always bad at the endings of these. So until next time, this has been Hat Collecting, the Disability Experience with Victoria Urquhart, and I'll see you next time.
Bye.